Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the chance to come back to the question I asked after I returned from the most recent UN climate negotiations on the fact that a credible climate plan must include plans to phase out oil and gas while supporting affected workers. Today feels particularly appropriate to do so given that international climate scientists shared their most recent report, one that speaks to this being our last chance before the climate crisis becomes irreversible, this being now their last report before the goal to limit warming to 1.5 degrees C is out of reach. Here's the crux of it for Canada. If we want even a 50% chance of staying under 1.5 degrees C in global average temperature rise, and if we were to do our fair share, then 86% of Canada's proven fossil fuel reserves need to remain unextracted. It's a tall challenge, particularly for a country that has chosen to be so dependent on oil. But we can and should rise to it. While the federal government isn't turning a blind eye to this crisis, carbon pricing is an example of an important measure that they've moved ahead with. In the words of Bill McKibben, on climate, winning slowly is the same as losing. And for every positive measure, like putting a price on pollution, they also continue to placate the oil and gas industry as if the science didn't apply to them. They've been busy approving oil exploration permits off the coast of Newfoundland, looking for more oil when we know we need to leave the majority of our proven reserves untouched if we want a shot at rising to this crisis. They also brag about billions of dollars of investment in climate action, and you'll no doubt hear this from the Parliamentary Secretary's remarks tonight, I expect. But so much of this so-called investment is in fact more subsidies to the very sector most responsible for the crisis. For example, in the form of a tax credit for a failed climate solution, so-called carbon capture and storage. In my original question, I asked if this government were going to continue to hide behind the greed of the oil and gas industry. In the months since, it's only gotten worse. While they continue to push the federal government to give them billions, last year's budget, for example, set aside $8.6 billion of our money for the fairy tale known as carbon capture. The oil and gas industry continues to rake in record profits. The 6 largest oil and gas companies operating in Canada booked pure profit of more than $35 billion last year. These are the same companies that lied to us for decades about the climate crisis that they helped cause. And in recent weeks, these companies have been telling Canadians and their MPs that they need more of our money to increase the carbon capture tax credit, money that could be invested in workers' livelihoods. Because if we're going to be honest, we don't need more of that. What we need is a federal government willing to be clear with Canadians about this crisis and the urgent action required to address it. We could unite Canadians around this, investing in workers' livelihoods, in deeply affordable public transit and high-speed rail, in a zero-emission electricity grid, and in deep energy retrofits of buildings across the country, which would create well-paid, high-skilled jobs and return to public coffers $2 to $5 for every dollar spent. My question for the Parliamentary Secretary, who I appreciate is here with us this evening, is will she advocate in her caucus for these transformational investments in place of more subsidies to the oil and gas industry while the window of opportunity is still open?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I agree fully. The climate change is a matter of tremendous urgency right now. And that is why, in fact, we are taking action. And so I was really liked hearing some of the ideas that the member opposite had, because, in fact, we are working on many of those. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that. Now, the price on carbon pollution was mentioned as one of the actions we have taken by the member opposite. And I don't think that we should actually undermine how important that is as a fundamental piece to action on climate change. It is a market-based solution, and it is effective. And actually, I see it in the decisions being made by industry when I speak with people and they say, we look at the price in carbon pollution and we are deciding that we are going to change the way we heat our buildings, the way that we use energy in our districts, for example, in the university, in my community. So it is having a very real and tangible impact. But the other thing we did is we legislated that we would be net zero by 2050. And to go along with that, we put out an emissions reduction plan that covers all sectors of our economy as to how we are going to reduce emissions. And that includes working towards a green building strategy. That includes reducing emissions from transportation. In fact, member opposite mentioned public transit as being important. I'm very happy that with federal support, my city has the largest number of electric buses in all of North America. Those are the types of things that we are working on and supporting, because what it is about moving away from combustion and doing so quickly. That is what our goal is. And we are working on that, as I've mentioned, if we're looking across all sectors of our economy. Not only that, we're investing in clean energy. It is important that we have a clean electrical grid to support all of these different forms that I'm talking about. And so when we're talking about that, Canada already has one of the cleanest electrical grids in the world. I'm really quite proud of it. 84% clean electrical grid. That is something to be proud about. And not only that, it attracts investments to our country. But let's just talk for a second about that. We know that we need to get the other 16%. And that is something that we are investing in, and we're working with our provinces and territories to make sure that we do have that clean electrical grid to support a clean economy as we go forward. Now, let me also talk quickly about investments that are coming to our country because of the fact that we have a clean electrical grid, and because when people look at our country, they see that we are making that commitment to have a net zero economy. One of the most recent ones that's very exciting is that Volkswagen decided just recently to open a plant for battery cells here in Canada, the first one outside of Europe, being built here in Canada. And that builds on other investments like Stellantis and LG that is building a battery plant here in Canada, once again, to support the North American market. Those are signals from around the world of people looking at what we are doing here in Canada, seeing the investments we are making towards a clean economy, and saying that this is where they want to build their parts for clean energy transition. Not only that, creating good paying jobs right here in our country. Those are the jobs that we are attracting and that we should be very proud of. So there are many parts of what we're talking about today. It is an urgent crisis, and we absolutely must take action. But I also want to say we are moving mountains in a lot of what you can see what we're doing, be it in reducing emissions and from all of the forms across all sectors, and building a clean economy for the future with good paying jobs.
The honourable member for Kitchener Centre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do not dispute for a second some of the investments that the federal government is making. But the reality is that by giving the oil and gas industry, for example, upwards of $20 billion a year, those investments work in cross-purpose with what the Parliamentary Secretary just spoke about. It feeds the lines of the opposition when they attack a carbon price. And more importantly, it's insufficient to respond to the climate crisis in the closing window of opportunity we have. And so my question back to the Parliamentary Secretary again is, will she stand up to end the subsidies to oil and gas? Because if we wanted a truly renewable grid, it would take about $17 billion to do it, according to the Green Budget Coalition, less than we currently give the oil and gas industry every single year.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, we have unequivocally stated that we will end fossil fuel subsidies for unabated fossil fuels. We have said that we will do that. We are working on that, as he knows. But beyond that, I think that we need to focus also on, not just investments that are being made, but legislated targets, like a sales target that we have put in place to have net zero emission vehicles by 2035, all new vehicles sold. We are taking positive actions moving forward. And I would hope that the member opposite also focuses on that.